There we go. Okay. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon to everyone out there, wherever you're viewing us at this present time. I'm student clergy Quincy Norman from Unity Fellowship Charleston by way of Columbia, South Carolina. We here for another What's Up Wednesday discussion. Yeah, that's what I just doing there, a few minutes ago. I think I'm gonna start calling it What's Up Wednesday discussion. Yeah, I like that. But you're asked for this topic to come back again. So if you didn't remember, for those who didn't watch part one to this, last month we had In Truth, What Are You Serving? It was catered to our transgender community. So y'all asked for us to come back again, and we're back for part two. So we ask you to please sit back, relax. If you have any questions, we are here live, Facebook Live. Throw up your questions and we'll get it to us and we'll try to answer it as best as possible. Once we sign off, like last month, if you still have questions, put the questions on in and we'll get back with you as soon as we can with an answer. Just a few announcements. Unity Fellowship Church of Charleston, we have our virtual services right here on our Facebook Live every first and third Sundays. So we ask you this first Sunday coming up next week in August to come and join us. Also, please help us out with our outreach called Bridging Unity. It's designed just what it says, to bridge the unity together. We want to be out there to help everyone, people who may be in need, Black, white, tall, short, woman, man. We're here to bridge everybody together because God is love and love is for everyone. And if you want to donate, we ask you to please donate to our church Cash App, which is $favor by. All right, and that's all the announcements that we have for this evening. So we're gonna go right on in to our topic, which is In Truth, What Are We Serving? So before we start with our questions tonight, I'm gonna have the panelists go and introduce themselves again. So who would like to start us off this evening?
Hi, I'm Rick Christ Church. Here I am the last time able to contribute to further of QIA. I am spirit, and my pronouns are Sabrina, Reverend Sabrina Bree. Those are my pronouns.
I love it. Thank you, Rad. Who's next?
Oh, you're welcome.
I'll go next. I am Reverend Devon Randolph Tinsley. My pronouns are he, him, his. And I'm just looking forward to doing this again.
All right,
Welcome,
all
welcome.
right. Reverend Marcus of Unity Philly, and yeah, I'm definitely excited to do this again. Get ready, it's gonna be a good time and very informative.
Awesome. Okay. And last and certainly not least.
Okay, I'm Minister Zorian. Some know me as Ice. Either way, I'll answer. My pronouns are he, him, or his. And for certain people, that I also go with sir. But that's what they are. I'm just looking forward to the enlightenment of this evening.
Okay.
I always look forward to each one teach one. So I'm looking forward to that. And I'm excited. I'm always excited to be among a group of spiritual minds. That's my story.
All right. Thank you. Thank you for your story. Very interesting to each one of our panelists this evening. So, like I said earlier, this topic is catered or geared to the trans community. So I'm just going to throw this question out there. Okay. First question I have to ask this evening is, how does someone know that they are transgender? You know, do they just wake up one morning and say, I think I'll go be transgender today? Or they just wake up the next day and say, I think I'm going to be gay today. You know, tell me, how does someone know, or does someone know that they are transgender?
Yeah, that's a good one. And I hear this question and I have to laugh because, you know, in this whole political arena, I feel like that's how, you know, our maybe more conservative siblings think it happens. Like you just wake up like this. And, you know, I may wake up fabulous, but, you know, you don't wake up and like just suddenly decide to be trans. I think for me, and I'll speak for me, like it was a journey and it was a process. You know, for me, we didn't have that language. We didn't have like transgender or trans anything wasn't even a word. So I had to go through and try on a bunch of identities that didn't quite fit until I found the words, or then people started to talk more on the internet and things like that. And then I was like, oh, that's it. So in a sense, yeah, I did kind of wake up and be like, oh, I'm trans, but it was after the language was presented to me. Because like I tried to be a stud, as we called them, a butch lesbian, and I realized all the other studs didn't think like I did. And I was like, okay, well, something don't match here. But there still wasn't language. So when the word became known to me, then that's when I knew. But now it's not a wake up and you know, like you pick out a shirt for the day or anything like that.
Okay.
So I can say I'm absolutely the narrative. People say, a lot of people say they knew from an early age. I knew from 3 that I was a boy. No, there wasn't a word for a boy who didn't look like a boy under his clothes, but yeah, I knew I was a boy. And I went about telling people that until puberty. And then at puberty, everything kind of went haywire when stuff started to happen that it isn't supposed to happen to a boy. But I knew early on. I kind of got dissuaded a little bit, and like Reverend Marcus said, you go through the other identities. Okay, if I'm not a boy, then I'm this. If I'm not gonna grow up to be a man, then I'm this. And then the language came.
Interesting.
Okay, I'm gonna piggyback off of both of them. I knew from the beginning. I just did not have a title for it. I just didn't see it anywhere else to know exactly where I would fit. But I've always known, I've always demonstrated male things, presence, activity, all that. I was just waiting to hear it so I could connect it with something. Because for a while I felt like I was the only one on the planet. So once I started going into Unity Fellowship Church in LA, I began to get exposed to the transgender community. But I was only exposed to our feminine sisters. I still hadn't seen a trans man or man with trans experience until later on in years, where when our deacons came from out of town and spoke from the pulpit and said that he was transgender. I was like, transgender? No way. I didn't connect him with being transgender, but then when he exposed his journey, I knew right off. There it is. Because I know I wasn't a quote unquote a stud lesbian. I know I wasn't a brister. I know I wasn't male identified. But once I heard this deacon say I'm transgender and explain what it was, I was like, okay, I'm home now. I know exactly. But it wasn't nothing that I woke up one morning and this is how I felt. It's not nothing that I caught from somebody else, because people have a tendency of saying, you guys have a choice. Didn't have a choice. But I knew. I just couldn't connect it with anything.
When you was gonna say something?
Come on. All right. Yeah, there was a word transgender. When I was younger, you cross-dress. That's what cross-dress. And then it wasn't until later that I heard transgender. And for me, so the only reference I had for transgender were cross-dressers, men who, dressed as women. Then later on, see, and that's the thing about English language, there aren't any words until one word put in. So, and then when that word gets put in, that's the word that identifies you. For me, Brister hit it. So for me, it was Brister. That when and I have to give Reverend Pauline credit and bringing that word. She did it in convocation one day, and she just stood up and was like, I want to thank all my Bristers. And she explained what Bristers was, brother sisters. And when I heard that word, it was like, that's me. That's me. So I was introduced transgender, and on the road to spirit.
Okay. Thank you. Bristers is new for me because I haven't heard that, maybe because I'm too young or too old. I don't know, however you want to see it. And this is the first time I heard the word Bristers.
Yeah, it's not used as often now. It's not used as often now as it was before. It was new, but yeah.
Okay. All right. Interesting. I've heard a few of y'all, mentioned identity. It wasn't an identity, so you was waiting for your identity to pop up. So that leads me to another question. What is the difference between sexual orientation and gender identity? Is it the same or is it different? Go ahead.
I was looking forward to this question. So I identify as a gay trans man, and people look at me like that doesn't make sense. So the answer is, or my answer is, that sexual orientation is out inside looking out, who I am attracted to, and my gender identity is looking in, who I am. So I identify as a gay trans man I'm attracted to men. But I'm a man of trans experience. So people say, well, why even transition if you're gonna be with men? You could have just stayed a woman. First of all, I was never a woman. I may have, presented as one because I had to for family reasons or whatever reasons, but I was never a woman. Inside, I was never a woman. My soul, my spirit, who I am was never female. So I didn't transition. And so then my sexual orientation has nothing to do with who I am, but my gender identity is. But I always thought that was an interesting question when people kind of mix the two and they don't go together.
Thank you for that breakdown. You're absolutely right. People do kind of mix them two together and they say, well, it's the same, and it's really not. Okay, awesome. What else would like to share? I'm interested.
Yeah, I'll definitely jump in there. I was like, look, but Rev Devon over there hit the nail on the head. Like, it is not the same. And so much of, I think that sexuality in general is always on this kind of seemingly heteronormative construct. So it's like the thought of, transitioning for one and then being attracted to something other than a woman is like, they don't get it. And I was like, yeah, no, it's completely separate. And those journeys can go parallel along the way, or they could be roundabout like this. And that's kind of how mine went, because, I was down this gender journey and then I was down this sexuality journey. And at some point I just said, you know what, it is what it is. I think if people ask me, I would say, just for easiest terms, I'm like, I identify as queer. I'm like, I like a lot of different things. Yeah, so I'm like, look, I just like a lot of different things on a lot of different days. And I think for me, even like when it comes to sexuality, it's for me, and I think that's why I say queer in general is like, it's more or less an energy that I'm attracted to. For the most part, I like a feminine energy, but I don't really care what that energy is housed in. It don't matter. It don't matter the package it comes in. It's a vibe. Um, and so yeah, easiest terms, because all of the other new terminologies, the same way with genders and things like that. There's always new terminology for sexualities, and I was like, it's just easy for me to say queer, and then y'all take it for whatever it is. But yeah, it's definitely not one and the same.
Okay. I know Reverend Sabrina or Minister Ice, one of y'all, I know y'all dying to chime in.
I was just gonna try to hit that question like a shot of Novocaine. Who I know I am in the inside has nothing to do with whom I am attracted to. That's because, like they say, attraction can come in different avenues, but who I am in the inside is never going to change. So that's the clearest way that I can put it. We'll let Reverend Sabrina come on in there on that one.
It's gonna blow our minds.
No, it is two different things. It really is. And to really understand it, you have to feel it. Because, and I think that's why people become uncomfortable, because they don't understand that there is a difference where they call things bromance when two men have this tight connection, and it has nothing to do with sex. It has to do with the deep feeling, the love that and there's different levels of love. It's not, doesn't necessarily have a sexual love or romantic love. It's just how you feel. So how close you feel and how much about that person. So gender has absolutely nothing to do with your sexuality. And as we're talking, I don't know if it really fits here. This movie I was watching a long time ago, comedy, and at one point in it, was a movie about interesting, a whole nother, that could lead into a whole nother theological conversation. But at one point in this movie, God was shown as female, right? And she did a topless course. She was wearing a dress, long hair, just woman figure, female figure. But as she was doing the flips, she was wearing boxers. So, and I say that to say it has nothing to do, your gender has nothing to do with your sexuality. Sexuality is fluid. As you said, Reverend Marcus, it's, you could be attractive, it's the energy. And I think that's what people don't realize. It's the energy, not so much the package, but it's the energy more. So that's what I have to say about it.
Okay, good. Seem like all y'all kind of agreeing to that. Yeah, it's the energy, and who you are has nothing to do with who you are attracted to. Definitely. But being that we're talking about who you are, which is your identity. Okay, my pronoun go as he, him, and his. But when we're talking about identity, is there a difference between transgender and intersex? And for some people who may not know what intersex is, and person that have both organs or both, genders. So, what is the difference between transgender and intersex, or is there is a difference?
Well,
That one's
intersex.
deep.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
It's a medical. It's a medical designation. So that's the way you were born. It's a biological designation. Transgender is, for me, is a spiritual designation, because God put me in a body and had me to go through these trials that that led to this man. But it had nothing to do with my biological designation, except that people want to put it in a box and say that I went from one thing to another. So I guess, but intersex is definitely a medical biological designation. It's not the same thing.
Yeah, most definitely. I second on that with the medical diagnosis aspects of it, and even more so just beyond physical presenting, like both genitalia or both sexual organs. It can even be on a chromosome level. Because for me, along my journey, I did a decent amount of research because I was trying to figure out why I was growing a beard in high school. Like full on, most of this was already here before I even took a shot of tea. And so I'm like, something is different. I went down the line of, well, am I intersex? And then I eventually came to a point where I was like, I don't need any type of piece of paper to confirm who I am. And then it moved more into that space that Rev Devon was talking about, it being more spiritual. I know who I am. I don't need outside confirmation from that. But it's definitely a lot of conditions out here that it may not even be a physical presentation. It may be on a internal molecular level. There may be intersex folks that are out there that don't even know they intersex, because everything on the outside is generally, I guess how they would expect it to be. But yeah, it's interesting. And listening to kind of a that's why I said it gets a little deep, because I've watched a couple of interviews and things like that with folks that are intersex, and they go through a gender journey as well, with reconciling what they have, if it's outwardly presenting and things like that, or if their gender was chosen for them by the doctors or their parents, because a lot of times that is the case where maybe babies that are born with ambiguous genitalia, somebody makes the decision and makes it so that it's, well, whatever it's closest to, then they go ahead and, for lack of a better word, hack them up, chop them up, and don't tell them nothing else. And then these kids, unfortunately, sometimes grow up and are wondering like why it doesn't match. So it is definitely different, but sometimes the journey can be similar when figuring out gender. Because even still, like, gender and sex, like your physical sex, are different things. Which gender is how you in your mind identify, and sex is what you're built with physically. So it's definitely interesting, definitely a journey, I think, on both ways, but there are differences.
Okay. Anybody else willing to chime in?
I like what you said, Reverend Marcus. I'm telling my age. Intersex, the other word, I've known it, grew up with it, be known as hermaphrodite. And that just comes to where, and for me, that strengthens the fact that your sex is assigned. Because for hermaphrodite, those who were born hermaphrodite, it was their parents and the doctors chose what sex they were going to be. And that goes to your point there, and they don't tell the child. So now the child is brought up as the sex that was chosen for them, that was assigned to them. And again, they don't understand that's not who they are. So sex being entered is not the same. It's not, so your sex is not who you are. And at another point, I had a very lively discussion with a friend of mine about being assigned. Because when it's trying to explain you were assigned your sex, you're like, I'm a natural born female. You're assigned. That it was chosen to say, if you didn't have this, then you're female. If you had this, then you're male. So you were assigned. So that might be another discussion. But just to say that your sex is not your gender.
Interesting term to use. Minister Ice, you want to chime in?
Well. First of all, we have to have a understanding that the word intersex is just a general term. It's a general term, and it can be used for a variety of situations. But the one that's most common are people who are born with reproductive or sexual anatomy that doesn't fit into male or female. But like Reverend Marcus was saying, to me, it doesn't even have to be a physical appearance. It could be totally what Marcus said. It could be an inner feeling. So when you kind of touch on that word, it opens up a big box. It does. It opens a big box. And
Okay.
and the thing with transgender, as we said earlier, we know it just takes us a minute to put a title on it, since everybody's comfortable. Everybody that has that thrill from control, they're comfortable to put somebody in a box or give somebody a title. It just takes us a minute to connect with it. And I agree with what they said about doctors and parents making choices. You know, they think when a little baby comes here and there's physical anatomy that tells them that they're intersex, they feel as though they should make a decision as to what that child should grow up to be. But that's not their work, because the way that child came here, that's the way God intended. And if everybody does their research, all of us are walking around here, male and female. All of us are. It's just a matter of us accepting the truth. So, my opinion of people making decisions as to who people should be, because you make a decision for your intersex child that you feel should be male, and you may be blocking the opportunity for it to be one of the greatest females in history. So they let them blossom in God's time, not in man's. So that's how I feel about that subject.
All right. That's what I'm talking about. See, I just be blowing people's mind, just be blowing their minds. But I'll go play devil's advocate here, okay? Right, for a little bit. So I heard this magic word called assign, okay? And Reverend Sabrina mentioned about, the parents assign the sex to a child that's born as an intersex. And Mr. Ice agreed. Now, Mr. Ice did mention something about, you should let the child be what God made that child to be. So a question came to mind when I was discussing this. So why don't transgender people get counseling to accept the gender that they were assigned at birth? So in other words, if God assigned you this gender, so why does transgender get counseling for the gender they were assigned from God at birth?
Mm, I'll be like, my petty response is, why don't we get counseling for folks that are born blonde and decide to dye their hair red? That's my petty response. You weren't born a redhead, so why are you trying to be a redhead when you were blonde? You know, um, but it goes kind of along those same lines, and even from a medical standpoint, and I know that they have since removed um transism. I forget how they had it from like the from the um medical books, like the dietistical manner. Come on now, where's my doctor friend at? Pronounce that for me.
Diagnostic.
That's it, that word right there. I ain't go to school for all of that, but I know what it is. They had a the diagnostic manual to give you all of these symptoms for quote unquote mental illnesses, in which transgenderism, transsexualism, and all of those things were in that book at one point in time. I think they've been removed. Correct me if I'm wrong, though. I think the most recent manual might have removed it. I'm not sure. That'll be
I
a
don't think
research
they
question.
removed.
You don't think it was removed? But in
No,
any case,
homosexuality was, but not transgender.
got you. But even still, even with this diagnosis, they don't have a pill to change it. They don't have anything. Their only remedy for someone who identifies as transgender or transsexual is a physical change. So you can go to therapy all you want. They tried to do that with the, anti-gay, what is it, pray to gay away camps, or all of those kind of thing, electroshock therapy. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. And even the medical books tell you it don't work. The only remedy that they can come up with is a physical change to match where your mental is. There's no pill for it. But I just tell people, is that really your natural hair color?
That's a good way of thinking about that.
Well,
Anybody else care to? Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I can say a little bit on that. I'm gonna tell my age right now. I'm 60 years old. I came up under the teachings of Jehovah's Witness. Being said, when I started connecting the dots and putting my picture together, I went to therapy. I went on my own because I was raised one way, but I was feeling something totally different. And trust me, after all that money spent and all those hours on the couch, look at me today. It did not work because that was not meant for me. It doesn't work. You can have them in therapy all day and all night. If they know that they know that they know who they are, therapy and nothing else is gonna change that. Because I don't believe in a quick fix. I don't believe that you can send somebody to therapy to change who they are spiritually. It's not gonna work. And if you out there playing with it, you out there being curious and trying to see what it's all about, then you're gonna go into therapy and guess what? You're gonna come out and you're gonna say, I'm cured. But if it's deep in the core, if it's what God meant for you to be, therapy ain't gonna help. You're just gonna be wasted money and wasted hours. So that's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
So why don't
Therapy.
do therapy? Because like Minister Ice said, almost called you Reverend. Minister Ice said it doesn't work. If anything, it can make matters worse. And because there's so many trans people who attempt suicide or complete suicidal acts, if anything, therapy should be doing is helping people step into whatever their truth is. Maybe it is, maybe they are just, curious, or maybe they are just following a trend. But it isn't for therapy to or it shouldn't be for therapy to convince people that this isn't who they are. And again, the attempts at that don't work. You can't change you can't change God's plan. So what you get is these people who are delivered and got all kinds of things to say about who they used to be. But if you catch them years down the line, they're either not here anymore or they have figured out who they really were supposed to be in the first place. So yeah, it just doesn't work.
Yes, I agree. Therapy, the original reason for therapy is to help you figure out who you are. Not to do some kind of hypnosis, not to do like, no, that's not who you are. This is who you are. Who you are, deep down inside, is going to come out anyway. It's going to manifest in some way, form, or fashion. And to not help people, truly help them, just come to being who they are, it is dangerous and it is hurtful and it can do a whole lot of harm, as Vaughn said. You have people who are committing suicide. You have people who are walking around miserable. You have people who are walking around, just angry, depressed, because they're not being who therapy is trying to tell them to be, not being who society is trying to tell them to be, and really not listening to themselves. So you figure that didn't work, so then nothing's gonna work. Or angry is like, oh, that worked for them, not realizing that other person is miserable and what they're doing is fake and phony and just not living life, not living their life, just doing just walking through. So to say that someone needs to go to therapy, or just see, now that's the word, go to therapy to convince them, just to convince them that that's not you, this is you. No, I'll take a no for that one.
Yeah, just hearing y'all comments, I agree. Therapy is supposed to help you come to one with who you really are supposed to be. Help you to enlighten yourself to understand that, hey, this is who I really was supposed to be or am supposed to be, and to, you know, uh, don't be ashamed of it. And when one comes to that conclusion and understand who they are supposed to be, what kind of medical treatments do a transgender person or transgender people seek out to do when they finally made this decision and say, okay, I'm assigned a woman, but I know deep down inside I have these feelings of man, or vice versa. What kind of medical treatments do they seek out?
Um, from a transgender perspective, I can't answer that, but from a two-spirited perspective, I can answer it in this way. When I was younger, I did want to transition to the entire, become physically a man, only because it was safer to walk down the street with a woman. So if I became physically a man, then when I walked down with the person that I wanted to be with, we wouldn't get these looks. We wouldn't get, we'd have to fear that, are we going to be attacked? Because we looked aesthetically like society would accept. So that's the only way I can answer that question. So I did want to be trans into physically a man, only for safety. And I did look up what needs to be done. And back then there wasn't much. You had to go to these other countries, or you had to go to these other states, and it was this amount of money, which that was not happening. So it's okay, well, do this on the slide, you know. So it from doing research as to what goes into it for myself, it takes a lot. It takes a lot. From mentally to physically, and even thinking, I know, and I had to think that my family, what am I going to do about that? You know, they're used to seeing me this way, and all of this is this way. And all of a sudden, I pop up, and what I would have to go through to try and prepare them for the change that they may see in me. Not may, but will see in me. And that's another, it's a lot. It's a lot. And realizing why I wanted to do it, just for safety reasons. I was good at that time. That and just something was saying it should be more of a better reason than for safety. Not that safety was enough, you know, but this would be a permanent thing. So it had to be a much deeper, permanent reason for me to do that. So it takes a lot to make the transition.
I like what you said, Reverend Sabrina. Let's start with, it's dangerous to assume that every trans person needs to do anything medically or surgically to transition. There's a thing called social transition. I started with that, just telling people who I am. This is my name. These are my pronouns. And you will refer to me that way, or we just won't be having interactions with each other. But let's just say people choose to have medical interventions. So for trans men, that can mean top surgery, bottom surgery. That can mean testosterone, or any combination of the two, masculinization procedures. But yeah, every trans person doesn't have a medical intervention. Some by choice, and some because of for medical reasons they can't have.
That's good to know. I didn't know that. Okay. So anybody else would like to chime in on that question?
I'm wondering if Reverend Lee is in the space, because I'm sure he can give us some conversation on what medical things transgender individuals do, if he can hear us. He might just be listening and don't want to appear. Well, here, I think something's happening. you know, I was gonna call you to the floor when I seen your name.
Bruh, I thought I was just coming in like on Google or something, just to sit in. I didn't until I popped up. I was like, oh man. I'm sorry. What was the question? I came in late. I'm not my hair.
Okay. The question was, what medical treatments do some transgender people seek out when they're trying to transition? So, they came to the realization this is who they are. Now they want to take the next step and transition their
Right.
physical appearance. So what kind of medical treatments do they seek out?
Well, one of the first one, I can't speak for all the guys, but one of the first ones usually, and I know one of my first ones was to get rid of the boobage, that little extra the extra stuff that weighs you down and holds you back up on top. Um, I was at 450 pounds, so you can imagine I had quite a load going on. Um, and then once I lost weight, everything just kind of went away with it. But that was one of my first things was to get rid of those things there. Um, and then from there, hysterectomy follows. Um, and I always want to tell people, those who don't, the guys who don't have hysterectomies, you still need to go and get your pap smears and everything like that there. Real men get pap smears, because you still got to take care of your innards, your parts. And so, but hysterectomy is next, then followed by, if you're going to get bottom surgery. There's a lot that goes into that. For me, I had to get my arm, I can show you. I had to get my arm done. This is one of my battle wounds here. So I had to get laser surgery for any hair growth and stuff like that there, because you don't want your penis having all kind of hair growing all over it. And so that's the next thing. You get your and then from there they do the bottom surgery. They take a flap from your leg, and they take your part of your veins right here, your artery, so that they can help lengthen your urethra. And so it takes a couple of years. It doesn't just happen right away for everybody. This was I started my process in 2011 was when I first started transition, taking my hormones, just so I can get my beard and stuff going. And then from there, it's just a gradual thing, maybe like every 2 years or so. I finally completed in 2019, I think it was 2018. So.
All right. Thank you for sharing that. That's interesting. Thank you for sharing that. No one else want to chime in? All right. So we was talking about transitioning. You came to the realization you want to change your physical appearance. And some of us have professional jobs. So, does your transitioning affect your professional life? If so, how does it? If not, how it does not? Anybody care to share?
So for me, I became my own boss. But prior to that, I was working in construction, male influence jobs. I used to work at the airport, throwing luggage and stuff like that there. But then I became my own boss, doing real estate and investments and stuff of that nature. So I didn't have to answer to anybody. So it didn't affect me the same way.
I believe for me, it didn't really affect. Um, it only affected actually in the beginning. At the beginning of, I guess, my transition, but it wasn't even like of the physical aspects of it. I worked in a call center, and um, for the most part, I was always masculine presenting in my dress and attire. That part was fine. They was used to seeing me shirt and tie, like I was crispy clean, like, fresh lineup and everything. But it didn't become an issue until I started asking questions because I was moving into the space of the legalities where changing my name, and all of these kind of things. And, truth of the matter, they'll find some other reasons to get rid of you, but I do believe it was because I had transitioned that I was terminated. Because it wasn't long after I had changed my name and asked for my name to be changed in the system. So new email address, new greeting on my phone call on my phone system, um, and all of that kind of stuff. And I guess actual permission to use the men's restroom, which that's a whole nother funny story in and of itself. Because I asked them the question. I said, all right, y'all clearly see me. Y'all see where I'm going with this. What bathroom y'all want me to use? Well, I'm in the South. I'm in South Carolina. Uh, and so they're like, well, until you get the surgery, you have to use the women's bathroom. And I was like, okay. And but it was just uncomfortable for everybody around. It was uncomfortable for me. This one girl, poor baby, she must have been new because like after so many times, I worked there maybe about 5, 7 years or so. So most people already knew me. But this poor girl, she was new. I had never seen her before in my life, and she almost passed out and died in that bathroom when I came out the stall. And so I took it upon myself from that day forward to just use the men's bathroom because, I shirt, tie, full beard. I had hair then, so it was always a crispy lineup, like all of that. But in that work setting, that was the only time that it was an issue, and that was only because it was known. Most other places, every other job that I had, um, transitioning wasn't a problem because there was no way for anyone to know. And yeah, there was no way for anybody to know. I just opted not to put in any previous names that I had on any applications, and we just kept it moving. So that was my experience. But yeah, and because they used other reasonings for terminating me, I couldn't really bring it up. And all the people that were saying it was because I was transitioning weren't willing to speak up. So, but that's okay. That's okay.
That happens in the South a lot. Anybody else care to chime in on that question?
So yeah, when I started transitioning, I was working at Papa John's, and, and I was going through my processes, getting my name changed, and that stuff. And so um, I think at that point I was still socially transitioning because I hadn't really gotten to the legal stuff yet. So it was like, no, we're not gonna change your name in the system. Okay, I get that. When I get the paper, I expect that to happen. But what about how does that affect what you call me? Because if you keep calling me by that name, I'm not going to respond to you. And then we're talking about safety stuff because you got the branch manager making whatever kind of comments he was making when I wasn't around. So then I have dudes that are like, if you were in jail with me, we would do something to you. And if you weren't, we weren't in this setting, you might not be safe. And I'm like, okay, so now we're talking about my safety. So I need you to do something for me. And they just were not cooperative at all. Got the assistant branch manager running around talking about she hates faggots, which had nothing to do with me at the time because I was married to a woman. But she wasn't even. She had an argument with a lesbian couple, so I don't even know where that came from. But just a whole lot of stuff was going on. So the end of the story is I ended up going to EEOC, and and that kind of got everybody together. But it was a mess for a minute.
Yeah, I could definitely understand that. I know times now it's getting slightly better in the workforce. It's becoming a little bit more accepting, but in the beginning, yeah, a lot of people struggle with you're changing your identity, the records, changing who you are called, the way you want to be called. So it's slowly getting there in the South. I can't speak for the North because I don't live in the North right now, but in the South, it's slowly getting there. Um, there was a question that came across on Facebook. So, has there ever been a time that you regret transitioning to the opposite sex? Or do you know anybody who ever regrets transitioning to the opposite sex? And then what happens? Because, for me, I believe once you transition, I don't believe you can transition back. Of course, I don't know. That's just my belief. So, has there ever been a time that you regret doing this or know somebody who have regret transitioning?
Oh, man.
I watch a lot of television, and so I did see, a couple of people on like Jerry Springer or whatever who detransitioned, and actually, one of my nephews, who's my niece, I guess now, detransitioned for family reasons, because she had to go back home to live with her family, and they weren't having him in their house, so she detransitioned. But I have never. It's never even been a thought. Never even been a no.
I can't say that it's ever been a regret. It has never been a regret. What I will say is, through the process, you'll question your choices. Um, and circling back to like that piece on therapy or piece on counseling, um, I think that it's helpful. And I don't think it should be a requirement to transition. And I don't know if that's still the case now. Is it still the case that most places you have to go through counseling or so forth to verify you're trans? So I don't think that it should be a requirement for medical transition. However, I do think it should be there for support through transition, because there's a lot of stuff that you don't even know to be prepared for. And I won't even lie, there was some mornings I just wake up and I'm like, well, I should have just stayed a stud for all of this. Especially for, everybody here on this call. Yeah, it's difficult to be a man, but it's you add on being a black man in America. That's a whole nother ball game that you can't really be prepared for. And there's so many like subtle little things that'll come up, like just what comes with being perceived as male, especially a black male. You're always a threat. It doesn't matter where you are, it doesn't matter what you're doing, people are terrified of you and they treat you that way. And how you interact with stuff. I had I think I made a video and I was talking about in the beginning where it's like, I love little kids. I'll be like, hey, little babies and all that kind of stuff. But as a young man at that time, I think I was in my early 20s, all of a sudden it's weird to be like, oh, look at the baby, and just, all of that. You can't do that. And so things that are natural and innate to you, you can't do in society that way. Now that I'm older and I got all this gray hair, and they just be like, oh, look at that old man. He needs some grandbabies or something, something like that. But no, it was never a regret. But the challenges with socialization, I will say, made me question the decision when it got hard. Because I'd be like, shoot, I know how to navigate as a stud. This whole being a black man in America is whole new territory. So yeah, that's my take on it. Never a regret.
Well, I can say I haven't met anybody that regrets their decision, and I definitely do not regret mine. But I can say I did have a scared moment, and that's simply because when I was transitioning, um, I was harassed physically by the police. But then that became mixed. Was I treated that way because I was trans, or was I treated that way because I represented Black men? But I was actually physically beat in the street by police. And then when it came to the time that they found out, because after they roughed me up, then they decided to frisk me. And then that's when they realized that obviously I was trans. From that point, I got called a bunch of its and things of that nature. But still going through all that, I don't regret my decision. And if I had to turn back the hands of time, I would do it again. I would still transition. Because the way I look at it, as I was merging into physical appearance malehood, because I was already there spiritually and emotionally, I just got a chance to witness what my Black brothers go through every day. So I believe out of every tragedy, there's a lesson and a blessing. So what it did was made me have a deeper appreciation and a deeper love for my Black brothers. Because now I can identify with what they go through. So I got a double thing out of it. I learned if I'm gonna walk in these shoes, I have to stand solid in these shoes, because society is not nice to it. So if you're gonna regret anything, please regret it from day one. Don't come into this walk and then regret it, because you're gonna be tested. But as I said, if I could turn back the hands of time, um, my physical appearance started when I was 50. And if there's gonna be a regret, is that I didn't have the knowledge and I didn't have the resources to do it earlier.
That's it. That right
But
there.
but it wouldn't have changed my decision. I just wish I would have did it in my 20s. A brother would have been too fly back then. But no, I have no regrets. I love who I am. I know God loves and accepts me, and I'm good. I'm good.
Yeah, I don't have any regrets. I heard myths of people I've heard the myths that there were people out there who, you know, one, you always hear these stories of from those who are trying to convince the young folks and stuff not to transition. There's always those people who have their lies. That's what I want to say is lies. But I'm like my brother Ice, Minister Zarian. My only regret is that I didn't have a word or language for it, for who I was at at an earlier age. But God knew when it was time, because I probably would have been in trouble, gotten in trouble, and all that kind of stuff, for uh, being who I was. I did have when I first started my transition, though, when you talk about the popo, I did have a moment when I first started my transition, because when, you know, before I would get pulled over and like Minister said, you for looking as though you're male. But then they get your driver's license and, you know, it changed my voice and yes, officer, what did I do wrong? You know, and they'd be like, oh yeah, okay, blah, 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 blah. Yeah. But once I started my transition and started getting a little hair on my face and changed my name and stuff, and I got pulled over, first thing I did was hands up out the window. I was like, I threw my hands out the window real quick with a quickness, because of that fear. It was a different type of fear. Before I would just get mad and angry, why you pull me over, you know. But after that, then I was like, oh shoot, I'm a black man, I'm getting pulled over, let me put my hands up real quick, I don't want no mistakes, you know. And the cop was like, put your hands down, nobody told you to put your hands up. And then I stuck him out the window. He was like, put them back in. But that was, I was just like, hey, no, there's not gonna be no mistakes. I'm reaching for my registration. But other than that, no regrets. Not even for any of my surgeries or anything like that. There, I have no. I just, when I knew that there was a possibility, I ran towards everything. I just was like I was getting to the finish line. Oh, get my hormones, yes. Oh, get these tatas taken off. All right. Oh, get my now getting my hysterectomy. That was a regret, only because of the pap smear. I mean, I cried like a. I fell into my wife's arms. That was the most I had ever felt violated, you know, because even though I said real men go and get their pap smears, I was one who didn't go as often, you know. And so when I had to go and get that done, it was just like, it was like a total violation. I couldn't, I just broke down forever. But then after that, everything was good to go. It was on, and it was done, and I'm back on the track again. All right, what's next? And still running towards it all right now, just enjoying life, you know, the life that just finally get to be me, you know. I just finally get to be free, live my life. You know, it's not always easy. There's always going to be trials and tribulations that still come into your life. But yeah, I wouldn't change it. I wouldn't go backwards if I could, if they paid me. Yeah.
Thank you. That is awesome to know that you regret your decisions. That's amazing, and a lot of courage that it took for each and every one of y'all to go through the transition and to then experience, you know, what Minister Ice and Reverend Lee had mentioned, you know, experience that encounter with the police, you know, because you know, I've as a black man also, I have experienced too, and I actually relate, you know, where you want my hands, you know, I don't want no sudden, you know, and it's not just for the black man, it's just people in general, especially this day and age, unfortunately. So it looks like we're getting close to time wrapping up. So just a few more questions I have for y'all tonight. What are some of the most significant changes facing the trans community today?
Well, we're going backwards as far as laws and legislation. You know, going back in time, and so that's one of the biggest things. I think the other thing is just that the youth, this new generation, not even just the youth, just the people who are coming out and about and know that they could be themselves now, that everybody's the liberation of it all, you know. Even in places where you know, in Jamaica and other places, I mean, the kids are like I need to be me. I'm going to be me no matter what, you know. I'm going to put on, you know, I'm going to put this outfit on because this is who I need to be. And even if it's meant risking their lives, you know. So I think those are the big changes, but legislation wise, I think we're just going backwards. There's something that we need to do. We need to do something about it. We got to get together. Got to get together.
Yes, I definitely agree with you on that. You ever heard the saying history repeats itself? It seems like it's happening here, but you're absolutely right. We need to get together and stand strong in this. You know, not even just the transgenders, your allies as well. You know, we need all stand strong. So we won't go backwards. So history won't repeat itself. Anybody else care to chime in?
I'll just say real quick, the increase in research. I say it all the time. My premise for my paper, my doctoral paper, was that there isn't enough research about the sexual health of trans men. And then I'm on the analysis part now, and I'm finding so much more, but it's all very recent, like the last 5 years or so. Like before that, we were kind of lumped in with trans women, and there wasn't a whole lot of research about just trans men. But there is so much more out there than even I thought. So research is definitely increasing. People are becoming more accepting of trans men and trans women.
Good.
I had this discussion. I don't say as a challenge. What I see from past history, that the transgender community is the next oppressed people that are going to be raised out of oppression, because so much attention is being given. And if we look at history, how it was, Black Lives Matter, it took that push of all allies and African Americans coming together, bringing it to the forefront of how things are wrong, how people are wrongly being treated. And that's what I see now, because all this legislation, as you were saying, Reverend Lee, that is coming up and being put in the forefront, is being put in the forefront because transgender community said, God is seeing my children too. So now I'm bringing into recognition that these are my children too, and you're going to do right by them. And that's how I see it. And in the push, yes, we're going to go through. There's a lot of negativity, and when we look back in history, all oppressed people have gone through a lot, but it's to recognize that we're God's children. And you can't continue to treat God's children in a negative, inhumane way. These are my children. I recognize them as my children. So that is, in all that's going through, all the negativity, is something that has to be done to bring notice to the forefront. You can't push back in the closet. We're out the closet. We're out. You can't hide anymore. You can't hide them in the attic. You can't hide in the basement. We're God's children. And you can no longer treat God's children in a negative manner. So that's the challenge and the change that I see. It's a challenge for those who are trying to shut that door and put all kinds of locks on the doors. But it is a growth for for us. It's a growth for bringing the oppressed to be unoppressed.
Okay. Well said. Well said. So we're going down to our last few minutes here. And yes, we all God's children definitely can't treat God's children like that. Like you said, that is definitely not the way. And just to close this out, we'd like to thank each and every one of you that joined us tonight. I'd like to thank the panelists that was on here. It was many, many more questions to ask, but it was just so much to get in this period of time. So maybe a part 3, we will see. But stay tuned and come back tomorrow night for Thankful Thursday. I know me and my acronym sim. But anyway, tomorrow night we will have a part 2 to reconnecting my sexuality with my spirituality. And Reverend Arrington will be the facilitator, and it will be right here on Facebook Live. So once again, thank y'all for joining in. Thank you for the questions. Thank you once again for the panelists for joining in once again. And we will see you later on in the future. And I love you. Why? Because God loves me first. Y'all have a good night.